Why do you coach football?
Yeah, that's a great starting point. That's the good origin. To really understand why I coach football, you have to understand my story. When I grew up, my father was not around. And so a root of fatherlessness is really where things stem from for me. Like any young boy, you want to be revered and respected. And so where I grew up, it really happened in one of two ways. It was you're either going to be involved in some sort of gang life and drugs, or you might be an athlete and make it out of your situation that way.
You know what, when I think about masculine, I think about, and again, I know this may be controversial for some people, I think about male is biological.
Sure,
Okay.
Male is.
Male is biological.
I think male is given.
Yeah,
I think
right.
manhood is earned.
Yeah. I think when manhood is that responsibility in terms of what, and then the masculinity is how we express those in terms of dealing with the responsibilities. Hi, my name is Jason Perry, and welcome to another episode of Real Life Matters, where we talk about real life stuff with real life people. And I am so excited today to be here to talk with what has become my good friend, CJ Cesario. Am I saying your name right?
You were spot on.
There you go.
Man, that's good stuff.
I'm so excited to be able to talk with CJ here today. And we're going to be talking about molding men, especially molding young men. And so welcome, CJ.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I am grateful for our friendship and the way that God's kind of crossed our paths over at Chicago Christian and what that's been like. And so to know I've got a big brother, a mentor, like Pastor Jason, thank you, man.
Man, my purpose, my pleasure. My purpose, my pleasure. And so one of the reasons I wanted to talk with CJ today is that we met, as he mentioned, at Chicago Christian High School, where I am the campus pastor. That's probably the joy of my week, probably the highlight of my week. I tell the kids all the time, it's my favorite day of the week, is to go and to hang out with those young people.
They love having you on campus, too.
Oh, man, I love being there.
Yep.
One of the things that really I gravitated with CJ, he's the head football coach. And they did something, this is your first year there, right? First year there. And they did something pretty amazing. They won the state championship for Illinois with football, but they did it with 27 players on the team. And of the starters, 10 went both ways.
Yeah, that's true.
So he won a state championship playing like 14 players.
That's about right. There's a term known as the functional 14 that was talked a little bit about, but all of those young men, every single one of them, a part of it played a role, and a specific role for us. So.
What's really interesting to me, I played football. I was a quarterback, so I understand football, and I played it, love watching it. I don't think I ever talked to you about football.
Yeah, we've not had many
We've
conversations.
never had a conversation
You let
about
me know that you've played, but we've not sat and talked about much.
We've never talked about football. And when I talk to the player, I have not yet had a conversation with them about football.
Oh, there's an opportunity coming for you to come speak to the team.
Yeah.
Let's go.
And so
I'm
this
ready.
is what's interesting to me. This is what grabbed my heart as I watched that team function, was that when I talked to them about why. What's your why? What impressed me with those young men, especially when I watched the championship game, I couldn't come because I was sick, and so I'm watching it on TV, right?
Yeah.
And that other team came out, and the announcers were talking about how great this team was, and they averaged like 40 points a game and 400 yards a game, and they were huge.
Sure.
And I'm looking at our guys, and I'm going, oh, man. We're in trouble. And from like the opening kickoff, it was obvious that we were going to win. It was obvious to me. And what hit me was this issue. I said, there's a character issue here.
Correct.
There's an issue of character that I was because if you remember, right, the first time I came to your office and talked with you, we didn't talk about the game. We talked about developing men. We talked about character. And then I heard you speaking to the young men at the Junior Summit.
Yeah.
And as soon as I sat down and I listened, I was like, oh, yeah. I think I immediately read up and said, I need to get you on the podcast. I just want to have that conversation.
Okay.
I don't know where the conversation is going to go today, but it doesn't really matter. I think wherever we talk about is going to be good.
Yep.
But I really just wanted to talk about this whole idea of molding men. So let me start with a general question, and then we're going to go deeper into some things.
Yeah.
Why do you coach football?
Yeah, that's a great starting point. That's the good origin. And I would say to really understand why I coach football, you have to understand my story.
Yeah.
And so I've got to take you a little bit on my story to understand that, and for anybody that might be listening. So I'm a Chicago native, born and raised on the west side of the city. So of the 77 neighborhoods that exist, I'm from the neighborhood of Austin. My mom is from Austin on the west side. My dad was from, south side, all over the place. However, when I grew up, my father was not around. And so a root of fatherlessness is really where things stem from for me. And so growing up where I did not have a male figure to really show me the way. And so like any young boy, you want to be revered and respected and cared for and know that you have value in this world as a young man. And so where I grew up, it really happened in one of two ways. It was you're either going to be involved in some sort of gang life and drugs, or you might be an athlete and make it out of your situation that way. So I gravitated towards athletics at a young age. I played 5 sports. I was a football, basketball, baseball, wrestling, and then eventually track and field guy as well. But that was everything for me. And then slowly, my identity and my value and my worth started coming from my success in sports. And so that really was it for me. Football became what I fell in love with. That was my number one sport, and I put all my eggs in that basket, all my identity in that basket. And as long as I was doing well on the football field and having success, I felt like I could give something to people and feel valuable in this world. And so that became my God, so to speak. And so I went on to play private Catholic League football, which is kind of the thing to do in the Chicagoland area.
Right.
And so my mother had provided some great opportunities for me and resources where we moved and bounced around a lot, made my way out to the northwest suburbs, and demographically was very, very different than what I grew up in. So growing up in that like pocket of Austin and the other places where I grew up, I was the minority.
Right.
And so I was around African-American black culture all the time. And so I feel more at home when I'm with black people. And so I grow up that way, but then I would go to a high school and drive, 45 minutes out to a northwest suburb, predominantly white, very affluent. And so bridging the gap of those socioeconomic differences, races, ethnicities is a huge part of that story for myself. And so again, I went from not having a father figure in my life, go to play college football at the University of Minnesota, and I start to come to the end of myself there because my identity is being CJ, a football player.
Right.
And I remember the last football game I ever played in. We were playing Texas Tech in a bowl game down in Houston, Texas, and we had lost last second on a field goal, 34-31. I knew it was the last time I was probably ever going to play football. The last time I was going to have, my helmet on my head, my shoulder pads on my shoulders. You remember that feeling?
Right, I do.
Cleats in your hand, And so I just remember getting to this place, Jason, where it's like, okay, CJ, you've worked your whole entire life to climb this mountain of trying to reach all this success and the pinnacle of playing Big Ten football and making it out of your situation and getting all these accolades and applauses from people back home. And that's great. But now you're kind of staring at the edge of a cliff looking over and peering because it's like, I don't know who I am without football. And so in that moment, I had an identity crisis. And I think that is the first place where God started to tug on my heart a little bit, where I started to ask the question, there's got to be more to life than this. Yeah. And so fast forward a little bit, thought I was going to be a college football coach the rest of my life. There were some other plans for me. I met a man, I knew a man, but met him on a different level. He's a mentor of mine, a best friend, a big brother, but he's also a family member. He's a cousin. Well, he moved down to the North Georgia, Chattanooga, Tennessee area and was a head coach there and at the high school level for football. And so he offered me my first job. And so I said yes to it. And I packed my bags in my car and I moved down to Chattanooga, Tennessee, a place I had never been, skeptical about the South, didn't know what it was going to be like. Right. But what happened during that time is where things really changed for me, Jason. Yeah. And so through that man, that mentorship, leadership, seeing what a man is supposed to be like, how he's supposed to operate, and he always talked about this Jesus guy. Yeah. I'm like, okay, who is this Jesus guy? Why does this really matter? How can that really function in my life? And then I started to open up this book called the Bible. Right. For the first time ever when I was 22, 23 years old. Yeah. And I was in relationship with other men that were walking out this whole Christian thing. And so I went from being fatherless to then coming to know my heavenly Father when I was 22, 23 years old. And then, met a woman, fell in love, got married. 6 months after being married, found out we were going to have a son, and then I was an earthly father.
Right.
And so there's kind of this fatherlessness, coming to know my heavenly father, and then being an earthly father to a son, that really captured my eye. And I loved investing in molding young men. And so now I'm coaching at different high schools over a span of about 10 years, worked for a ministry as well, did a little bit of a pastoral role at a church. But of all the different areas and avenues that I've served in, outside of being a parent, I have not found a platform as incredible as being a coach to transform a life. And for me, when you ask why coaching, this is why. Yeah. I love molding and shaping young men through the platform and the avenue of football. I think that it is a place where you can really dive deep, and there are some physical things, and there's adversity and things that you have to face that are going to hit you in life, where there's going to be some things in life that you think are unfair. And there are a lot of things in life that are not fair, but it is a breeding ground to really help restore true masculine leadership back to the world.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's what it is. Football is just a platform to restore true masculine leadership back to the world. That's why I coach.
As you were talking, my mind went in at least 7 different directions.
I'm sure it did. That sounds like you.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. It went at least 7 different directions. Yeah. One, because I thought of my own story.
Yeah.
Of fatherlessness. Yep. You know, I'm 65.
Yeah.
I'll be 65 in a couple of days, and I've never called a man dad in my life. And so one of the things that I think about often is, how did I become, I think I'm a good dad. At least that's what my kids tell me.
Sure.
Right? That's what I pay them to say. Right?
Yeah.
People have asked me, how did you become a good dad when you've never had a dad?
Yeah. That's a good question.
You know, yeah. And so this idea of fatherless fathering is a critical thing that I think a lot of men deal with because they didn't have that model.
Correct.
And I think as I listen to your story, I hear my story in it because I recognize that the reason that I became a good dad was looking at my dad, at Abba, Father.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. And that I know the earthly fathers are supposed to be, as we put our attention on them, and they are aligned with God, we see God over their shoulders.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
But sometimes we don't have that person that we can see that aligns us.
Right.
And it's the grace of God that gets us aligned with Him. In spite of the fact that this person off to the side has not aligned us and can very easily reshape our understanding of what this God Father is supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you deal with any of that in terms of, wait a minute, you saying you're God, my heavenly Father, but I see my earthly father. One of these things is not like the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you align those things?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Jason. I think what we start to really infer as young men, I probably did this around 8 to 10 years old. I remember this of, hey, something's not right. This isn't how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And the only example I had is what I did not want to be. And so I did look at my father, who was around a little bit. He was in and out of prison at certain points in his life and just really struggled, was out, on his own trying to figure things out without a father himself. And so it just didn't work out for him that well during that time in my maturity growing up. And so I had to figure it out myself. But unfortunately, during that time when I was 8, 10, 12, 14 years old, the example that I went off is, hey, I don't want to be like this. And so now I'm going to shape my own model of what manhood's supposed to be like, not based off of a good example, based off of a bad example.
Right.
And so I dealt with that. But then as I came to know my heavenly Father and I came to know Christ when I was 22, 23 years old, that's when I had the first opportunity to go, oh my goodness, the grace and the covering that He had over me for 22, 23 years of not knowing Him, not acknowledging Him, the places that He still put me in, the blessings with me without really knowing Him was remarkable.
Right.
That was part of that process for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, man, it's so important to be able to recognize that everything that we need to know about being a man, about being a father, it's right there. with God.
Yes.
You know, and
Yep. He's the blueprint.
He's the blueprint, right?
Yep.
And I know that there are people who may be listening to this podcast and say, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in Jesus. I'm not a Christian. Okay, fine.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Right.
You know, because this isn't about you becoming a Christian. It's about saying, is there a blueprint for man?
Correct.
Is there a blueprint for how I should be doing?
Yes.
And so I think that there are certain principles in terms of what it means to be a man and what it means to be masculine.
Yes.
That have nothing to do with your spiritual state.
Sure.
It has nothing to do with it. It's just that how do I operate as a human being, and is there a pattern that I can follow, that if I follow these blueprints, if I follow these steps, I'm going to become successful as a man.
Yeah, and for me, I've just not found a better blueprint than where I found it, you know, in what I would call the truth of the Bible, but also just through those other men, through my mentor, through other coaches that have been in my life, that I've found some of those pieces to the puzzle, so to speak.
What are some of the basic things that you really want to instill in young men?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a mission with everything, right? And the mission for us is to make sure that we are developing quality men and elite players. That is our team identity statement. So we want our young men to be able to say and know right off the top of their mind, hey, what am I doing here? Oh, that's right. I'm here to become a quality man and an elite player, right? So we speak to the person and we speak to the player. But first and foremost, the person. And that's where things really might be a little bit different and shifted in our model, where we want to come from a mission-driven program and not a results-driven program.
Yeah.
And so many times we find ourselves driven by results, success, success, success. How do you even define that? What does that even mean? But for us, it's about the mission. And so for us, our mission and our coach's mission statement, our program mission statement that we have for Chicago Christian football is to build authentic, strong, ambitious men by boldly leading them to be all that they are created for.
Yeah.
That's the mission. So because of that, we want to instill in them how to be a quality man and elite players. So we've got core values, right? Yeah. And so our quality man core values is this, that we want you to be alert, stand firm in the faith, act like a man, be strong, and do everything in love. So when we break those down, we get 5 core values that our young men know, and I put them through the ringer. Right. We do a lot of things to make sure that they know those and that we spend time investing into them with those things. And so we want them to be guardians. That's what we want them to be. We want them to pursue being virtuous. We want them to be bold servant leaders. We want them to be hope dealers, and we want them to be responsible. So those are the 5 things that we talk about. So I want to instill those 5 core values in my young men through the platform of football, through the physical adversity and trials of it, but also through time and teaching and wisdom that's implemented in our program.
You talked about masculinity.
Yes.
Big topic now.
It is a huge topic.
It is a huge topic right now. I remember back in probably the 90s.
Okay. I was little then.
Yeah, you were little.
I was growing up. I was enjoying Michael Jordan and the Bulls back then.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
That was a fun time. Well, there was this movement, but it was led by a football coach, Bill McCartney, from the University of Colorado, and it was filling stadiums with men. And I am
like
drawing
a huge crusade that was happening at that time. I don't remember.
And he talked about authentic masculinity.
Yeah.
And Promise Keepers.
Promise Keepers.
I
can't wait to go back and look it up.
Yes, go back and look up Promise Keepers.
Okay.
But I just remember some of the backlash that came from that because people were like, what do you mean masculine? What does that mean, right?
Defining that.
Defining
in our
it.
society is so difficult and so touchy.
Exactly.
Right.
I talked about the time when I was speaking on a panel at a fatherhood conference in D.C.
Yeah.
And the person on the panel, somebody stood up in the audience and said, could you talk about toxic masculinity? And so the man to my right started saying, well, masculinity is broken.
Okay.
And I've talked about this before, and I probably shouldn't have done this, but I couldn't help myself.
Yeah. I feel like you've probably found yourself in those situations.
Yeah, I did. And I was like, I shouldn't say this. However, I reached over and I took his mic and I pushed his mic down.
Oh, wow.
And I said, no, you can't say that. Masculinity is not broken.
Sure.
Because if you tell me masculinity is broken, then what is there left for me? Because the only thing left is femininity. I'm not feminine.
Correct.
I said, so I can't let you say that masculinity is broken. Our definitions
100%.
of masculinity are broken.
Yeah.
We need to look at the definitions.
Right.
I said, and so when you define masculinity prima facie on its face as toxic, you're telling me prima facie, I am broken.
Right.
I am toxic.
Right.
So I have worked for years thinking through this idea of male masculinity, manhood.
Correct.
Female femininity, womanhood, looking at those differentiations. I'm wondering if you've come up with a simple definition that you kind of go by. What is masculinity?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. To break it down in simplicity, there's a little bit of a backstory there. So again, kind of like my father, and the example that he gave me, for me, a lot of times it starts with what it's not. And then you get to figure out what it is, and you start to shape and mold your definition that way. I really believe there's two types of men in this world. I believe that there are counterfeit men and countercultural men. And in reading some of these books that I have fallen in love with, one of them is called The Point Man by Steve Farrar. I would definitely advise, and suggest that to be a book that men read. He talks about the counterfeit man versus the countercultural man. And he talks about, what does manhood really mean? What does it look like? And so in terms of trying to find a definition for it, here's what we see in the counterfeit man. We see a guy or a person in society that likes to eat wings, watch football games, might smoke a cigar. People probably would say maybe he's big and macho and aggressive and mean. Or you have the other side of counterfeit masculinity that's very timid and passive. I think passivity is actually the deepest root of man's first sin. And so I think you have those two types of counterfeits of men, and you want to find a true definition of it somewhere in the middle. And again, going back to that blueprint that I have had for my life, I have found it in that person of Jesus, where he is not passive and he is not just overly aggressive, but he is assertive. And so I find some sort of a definition for true manhood in being assertive. And an assertive man is someone that can be respectful but firm, that stands for morally upright, righteous, good things, that speaks up and keeps things in line and leads and builds systems and structures to lead people and kingdoms and households and businesses. And so those have to be part of the pieces in a definition of a true man. And so that has to be there. But I would also say, I think a bigger issue, and we can really go a long way on this, is we are constantly surrounded by what I would call comparators. I think we live in a society, in a world of comparison. I think social media has been somewhat or can be somewhat of a trap with those things. I don't overall think that social media is bad. I think social media is neutral. I think people use it for good and bad things, or the fall of certain things in our human nature. And here's what I know is we've either seen or surrounded ourselves with what the average masculine man in society, especially in America, looks like, right? He looks like the guy that I talked about. He's eating the wings, the football games, he's doing this, he's doing that. But I think true manhood is action. I think there is specific action in manhood that helps to define what manhood looks like. So I'm talking more about a manhood that makes a woman feel confident, a family feel whole, a community feel a sense of purpose and pride. That is what I think manhood really looks like. So defining manhood is action, but there's specific action in it. Right? And so I think, I partake in eating wings and going to football games, and I like all of those things, but those things aren't particularly masculine. They're just things that we like to do. They're not bad, but to actually be living and operating in that true masculine vein, it's more of making a woman feel comfortable, leading a home, making a community, robust and thriving and those sorts of things. Like that is a definition of what a man does. So I would have to say it's hard for me to just put it in one sentence. But what do you think? What do you have on that?
You know what? When I think about masculine, I think about male. And again, I know this may be controversial for some people, but It is what it is.
Yeah.
I think about male is biological.
Sure.
Okay.
Male is.
Male is biological.
I think male is given.
Yeah.
I think
right.
manhood is earned.
Yeah. I think when manhood is that responsibility in terms of and then the masculinity is how we express those in terms of dealing with the responsibilities that have either you have incurred because of your decisions or have been placed upon you because of your circumstances.
Correct.
And then how do you respond to that?
Yep.
I think at the heart of masculinity is the understanding of purpose and the role that we have been given.
Yes.
And so I think when I understand the responsibility that God has placed upon the male species.
Yep.
And I, again, don't have to be a Christian, but everybody has a worldview. My worldview requires me to say that I am created by God for a purpose.
Yeah.
Okay. And so therefore I go back to the Bible. Okay, well then God, what is the purpose I've been created for?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And now I go back and look at what it says in Scripture. And I remember I put this, I talked about this in another podcast with somebody else, and a commenter on one of the videos like, that's great if that wasn't a fairy tale. Okay, well, that's fine. If you believe it's a fairy tale, then don't follow it.
Right.
I don't believe it's a fairy tale,
Correct.
and I do follow it, and
Correct.
I choose to guide my life by it,
Right.
and that's fine. But when God gave Adam and Eve responsibility, he said, he used the word, he gave them dominion.
He did.
And dominion, that word dominion, was only used of God, and it talks about how God cared for creation.
Yep.
Well, he gave Adam these responsibilities of leadership.
Right.
Right.
And what happened?
Yeah, and what happened was that he was passive.
Correct.
And because he passively stood by and did not lead, and did not perform the way he was supposed to,
right,
did not do those things, that did not have that mindset. It was not aggression.
Yep.
Because, and this is the problem,
Yep.
dominion means to serve the creation the way the creator would serve it. And so if God delegated
Correct.
that responsibility to us as
mankind.
mankind,
Right. Yeah.
of serving creation with the same level of love and care and selflessness that he would do with it, we're supposed to do this. But this is the perversion.
Yep.
And this is what happened within culture. Dominion became domination.
Yeah.
And so
That's the
now
aggressive side.
that's the aggressive side of it.
Right.
So you had on one side, you had the passivity,
Yes.
right, where Adam did not step up and operate
Yeah.
in terms of being the intercessor,
Right.
to stand between Eve and danger,
Correct.
because he didn't do that because he was passive.
Right.
Then that it created problems.
Right.
But then those problems ended up being perverted of his role of dominion turned into domination.
Yes.
And now it becomes aggressive.
Right.
And you see that manifested in his son.
Right.
That aggressively kills his brother.
Right.
So I think that when I think about masculinity, I think masculinity has to do with understanding our roles as leaders.
Correct.
Within our families.
Yep.
I just gave you a book, Becoming a Gatekeeper of Yourself, of becoming leaders within ourselves, within our families, within our communities, and responsibly using how God has wired us to responsibly use the aggression within us,
Right.
To lovingly use that aggression within us, to assertively say, we will lead, and I will love and I will lead in a way that helps you become who you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
To me, that is responsible masculinity.
Correct.
Loving and leading in the way that builds up other people.
Absolutely.
And helps us achieve purpose, because there's a vision that I understand from my life.
And being wired in such a way and knowing how to operate in how you've been created requires a place that you have to go back to, a place of origin that has the blueprint, that shows the way.
Yeah.
And without it, which is where I think most of our young men are, they're growing up without that, without the understanding of what is available to them. They then fall victim to what they see out in society.
Yeah, yeah.
And so many times out in society, and this is something I teach to our football players, and I just had the opportunity to go to the state of Iowa to speak at a coaches clinic last week to 1,500 coaches. And it was incredible to go do this. And most of the time they talk about X's and O's at these breakout sessions. Right. And I spoke more about this mission-driven football program and all of these things. Well, we get to this place where we talk about the reason why we don't see men operating the way they're supposed to in the world. And I teach this thing called the tallest midget and the tallest midget syndrome. And you might be around some of these men, or you might be around some of these, especially for young men if they hear any of this, around these guys in high school, where it looks like they've got it all together. It looks like they're successful, and they are doing successful things that look like what society says yes to manhood is, right? And you're winning in all these areas, and that young man would probably puff himself up and say, hey, I'm the way. Mm-hmm. I'm doing it. I have made it to the pinnacle of this. And he looks like a giant until a true giant walks in.
Right.
And when a true giant, right, someone that's walking in true masculinity, that knows the way, that knows how they're wired, that knows and has seen this, and someone has shown them the way of what true masculinity looks like, all of a sudden, the guy that thought he was a giant is actually no more than the tallest midget.
Yeah.
And we talk about what that means. And a lot of times it comes from comparing. And
right.
This is what I've seen out in the world. So as long as I do this well, like I see someone else doing it, and everybody gives them praise and applause for how they're doing their masculinity, then I've reached it.
Right.
And I'm doing it right.
Right.
But so often, those men find themselves just becoming the tallest midget.
Yeah.
And we don't want to be tall midgets. We want to be true giants in the world.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we teach that I think hits home to the source of what you're speaking about.
What are you looking at?
Mm-hmm.
What's the standard?
Right.
What is the standard that you are comparing yourself to?
Right.
To say, am I really being this person that I'm supposed to be, or that I want to be? Or do I even have an understanding?
Right. Because here's something that's really dangerous, is thinking that you're following a giant of a man when he himself is just the tallest midget. So really you've surrounded yourself by an average man.
Yeah.
And so you're pushing to reach average.
Yeah.
And when you reach average, you think you've made it.
Right.
But we're not here to be average.
Yeah.
And Jesus didn't die for us to be average.
You know, it's interesting. This story just pops into my head. A few years ago, I was speaking at a high school and talking to these kids. I think all of these boys, the program I was speaking in, the kids have been expelled. But this was a kind of redemption program.
Okay.
Yep. And so all of the kids in the school, in this classroom, had been expelled from school, but they had a second chance into this program. So I was kind of telling my story a little bit, and this young man walked up to me afterwards, and he said, Mr. Perry, can I talk with you? I said, sure. He said, how did you become Mr. Perry? I always love that story.
But there's
great
something
question.
deep about what he meant.
Oh, it was a deep question.
Right.
He said, how did you? I said, what do you mean by that? Mm-hmm. He said, when you talk about your story, he said, you should have been something different. But instead of you becoming this bad thing, you became Mr. Perry.
Wow.
How did you get there?
Wow.
I was like, that is such a phenomenal question.
That is.
I said, let's do this, man. I said, I'll be back in 2 weeks. I said, I said, when you get on my calendar, you're important. I said, not everybody gets on my calendar. Yeah. So I pulled out my phone and I said, here, I need you to type your name at this time spot and say, we have a meeting in 2 weeks, okay? You're now on my calendar. You're on my agenda. He said, okay. He was excited about that. I said, now this is what I want you to do. I said, you just told me that you don't listen to anybody. Because he said that to me. He said, I don't listen to anybody, but when you're talking, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat. He said, I don't listen to my own dad. I don't listen to my mom. I don't listen to my dad. That's why I'm kicked out.
Yeah.
And I said, he said, but I just want to know, how did you become this person? He said, the men in my community, and this is important. He said, the men in my community tell me that I'm special. They tell me I'm different. And he says, but I don't know what they mean by that.
Right.
So I said, this is what I want you to do. I need you to do this over the next 2 weeks. I need you to go to those men and ask them two questions. One, why am I special? And the second question I need you to ask them is, tell me how you can help me become that person that you said.
Right.
He said, okay. 2 weeks later, I go back and we're talking. As we set up our appointment.
Yeah.
We go to another room.
It's
We
time
start
to get
talking.
answers.
We're going to get some answers. I said, did you ask those men? He said, I did. And he was smiling. Well, he said, so these are the men. This boy is 15 years old. Mm-hmm. These are the men that he talked to. He said, these are guys who hang out in my dad's garage all day. Oof. They're like 21 years old. Okay. So his standard for manhood were these unemployed men, 21-year-old men who hung out in his dad's garage.
Yeah. What were those answers like?
So I said, did you ask them the first question? And he said, yeah, they told me. He's still smiling. He said, they told me that, I was smart and that I had more potential than they did and all of these things. I said, but did they give you something specific? He said, they didn't really give me anything specific.
Right.
They just told me I was smart and I was intelligent and I had all this potential.
Yeah.
I said, great. And so he's still smiling. I said, what about the second question? Did you ask them how they could help you? Mm. And his demeanor completely changed. His face broke.
Yep.
His shoulders kind of slumped. He said, I did ask them. And what did they say?
Yeah.
They said they couldn't help me get there. I said, why not? He said, because nobody ever helped them. And so
the whole crisis.
Yes, the whole crisis
that is the
right there.
Crisis.
Right. That is the crisis
right.
that we're looking at. And when I look at this idea of men being gatekeepers.
Yeah.
Gatekeepers are supposed to be the wisdom bearers, the storytellers, the history keepers, the filters of our community. But I think of another story that goes with this, seeing this, I heard this young man interviewing an old man once. And this is what the old man said. Old men are built for wisdom. Young men are built for war. When young men come to old men looking for wisdom and they find no wisdom, young men run wild.
Yeah.
I always think about that with this young man.
Yeah.
Because he went to older men, to gatekeepers, looking for wisdom.
And they didn't have the answer.
And they had no answer. So where does he left with?
Right.
I know I have potential, but I have no way of pulling it out of me.
Right.
I have no way of getting to that because he was looking for those leaders to give him vision. Yeah. Those leaders to give him practices. Those leaders to help him understand and reveal purpose and a plan, a practical plan for achieving purpose. And he didn't find it.
Right.
And so where does that leave him?
Yeah. And the first old man that you spoke of said that old men are here for wisdom.
Yeah.
Young men are here for war.
Yeah.
Well, that means that there's a battle.
Yes.
That means there's something coming up against you.
Yes.
You have to be equipped for a battle.
Yeah.
And so, without it, they run wild.
They run wild.
And that's what we see in society. That's where we're at. And that's why we have to restore it. Who's going to do it?
Right.
Someone has to.
Right.
There's got to be a platform where you can do this, where you can instill these things, where you can show the true way, where you can equip men for battle so they can go to war, so to speak. And that's where the crisis lies.
Right, right. Yeah, that is the crisis. And so I know I've heard you talk about the man crisis.
Yeah.
So before you talk about, I want to put that in the context.
Yep.
One of the reasons I think I was so excited about having this conversation with you because of the synchronous alignment of our visions.
Correct.
So I have this statement that I use. I call it my men's mentoring mantra.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And it is this: boys play.
Yep.
Young men prepare, and men perform.
Yeah. It's really good.
Yeah.
When I saw it, I said, man, I'm taking this. I'm taking this.
And so, but when young men fail to prepare, they become men who continue to play.
Yep.
I see so many men now that are playing because they have not prepared themselves as young men.
Correct. Especially when you talk about they continue to play because they weren't equipped for the war, right? They weren't ready to perform. These are some stats that I've just got done talking about to 1,500 coaches, in the state of Iowa. Is this men today? And I said it this way: they want to live in their adolescence, right? They want to continue to be boys. They want to play. 33% of all 20 to 30-year-old males in America right now still live at home. Okay, 33% of all those that are 20 to 30 years old.
Wow.
You think about being 30, still being at the house now. It's a little bit different. There's some tough things that are kind of going on in society, economy, all that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit different, but let's go a little bit further, okay? Men ages of 18 to 42 on average change jobs 11 times. What does that mean? What comes with that, right? What is the root of that? But then this is the one that I think is really the kicker, okay? The average age of a video game player. And video game player was 7 hours or more per week dedicated to playing video games. Now, before I finish this, let me not knock on people that play video games. I have a son. From time to time, we sit down and play a video game for some fun. But this is vegging out on it. It is a lifestyle. It is what you like to do more than anything else outside of your vocation. It is something that you invest in and you get lost in, okay? This is the stat for that. The average age of a video game player giving 7 hours a week to it or more is now 35 years old.
Wow.
That's the average age of a video game player, 35 years old. And so that's the issue that we have, is that when older men don't know how to finish life, and then middle-aged men can't stay connected to their families, you've got young men that just run wild. That's it.
Yeah.
So, and the way that I have said this, which I like yours better, is that there's 3 phases of masculinity, so to speak. You've got childhood, right? When you're a child, you have to depend on everyone. You've got mom and dad. They have to do everything for you. They got to tie the shoes. They got to wipe your butt. They got to they got to do it all for you. So when you're a child, you depend on everybody. Right? When you're a boy, you start to depend on somebody. Right? And that's where the father, that's where the coaches and the leaders are supposed to start really pouring into those young men to get them equipped and prepared. And then in manhood, you depend on nobody or maybe one person or one way or the blueprint because you've been trained. So it's childhood, you have to start depending on everybody from that point on. Boyhood, you depend on somebody to help show you the way. And then when you're a man, you now lead yourself. You've had the blueprint, you know the way. You might have a source that you're still connected to show you the way, to sharpen you, to continue to transform you. But you now feed yourself in manhood.
That becomes attention.
Yep.
Because you are transitioning.
Correct. From
being dependent upon somebody.
That's right.
But then you are not completely, you don't have the capacity to be completely on your own.
Right.
And so now there's this tension of let me do it by myself, even though I don't have the capacity to do it by myself.
Correct.
So you know what I often tell the young men that, that I mentor, and I have spent 46 years mentoring. I just love doing that. Even now at 65, I'm still, one of the reasons I took the job at Chicago Christian High School was that so that I could mentor 10 to 12 boys every week. That's one of the reasons I took the job for that.
Right.
And as I talk to those young men, I tell them often, you are pseudo men right now. I said, you are men with training wheels.
They're like, what's pseudo?
You were pseudo, I didn't say pseudo, I said pseudo. I said, you're not completely men because you are still in this stage where you have training wheels.
Right.
You are men with training wheels on because you still need some help navigating the terrain. You haven't learned how to balance yet. You haven't learned how to pedal, to keep pedaling. Right?
Yep.
And I think that, but when you're living in that tension and you're supposed to be learning how to do those things, but there's nobody to guide you.
Correct.
It becomes problematic.
Correct.
It becomes problematic. I think about teaching my son how to ride a bike, and that was a seminal moment for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a seminal moment. And again, for me, nobody taught me how to do it. So I didn't know how to tell him. And so I got frustrated.
Go figure it out.
Right, go figure it out. I was like, push him down the hill, go.
Right.
And I remember at one point when it finally hit me what to tell him. Because I'm walking alongside of him with his training wheels. So he has lots of support.
Yep.
He has me and he has his training wheels.
Yes.
He can't fall.
Can't.
He can't. And I'm helping him. And I realized, why is he not getting this? And I finally said to him, son, you got to pedal.
Right.
You have to pedal.
Right.
I can't just walk alongside of you forever. You must pedal.
That is correct.
And when you pedal,
Yep.
it helps your balance.
It's a beautiful illustration.
That's
a beautiful illustration.
You got to keep pedaling, man. And I think that
there is a responsibility
yes.
in you coming into your own manhood.
Yes.
You have to say yes to the responsibility.
Yes.
It is a choice.
Yes.
And then it is action.
Yep. But when you choose not to pedal, you know what will happen? You will go into trying to ride your bike without pedaling and trying to figure out why you keep falling.
Right. Over
and over again because you refuse the help and you refuse to operate to take advantage of those older men who you need to have in your life, who give you the wisdom to tell you got to keep pedaling. There's nothing in you that just tells you to pedal. No, you're in there, I got wheels, I got a handle, let's just go. Let's just think this is supposed to work, right?
Right.
You can sit on a bike with training wheels, and you can have a person who's alongside of you. But if you ain't pedaling, you're going to need them to perambulate. You're going to need them to constantly push you to move you from station to station because you have no internal capacity to power yourself.
Right.
But I'm hoping that young men are listening to this.
Yes.
Because I need them to understand you need this internal responsibility that you must take for yourself to begin to say, what do I need? I need training wheels right now. No, I don't have the capacity to do X, Y, and Z.
I need a father figure to be alongside of me.
Yeah, I need somebody. Yeah, but you know what? And I guess even I'm thinking about this. What are the training wheels? There are certain things you need in your life that will guide you, even if there is nobody else alongside of you.
Correct.
There are certain practices that you need to have in your life. This is developed, even as I'm saying this. There are those training wheels are certain experiences that you need to have, certain positions you need to be in, that certain practices you need to engage in.
Yeah, attributes to be
developed.
Right.
Yes, that serve as they hold you up.
Correct.
But then it's also nice to have, and you can have those things even if there is nobody that comes alongside of you. But then at some point, those things have to go along, and then you still have to ride on your own.
Right.
But it's also nice to have a father figure, somebody who comes alongside of you, who tells you those things that are not naturally come in that.
It is nice, but if not, that can't be your excuse.
It cannot be your excuse. You still got to pedal.
That's right.
You still got to keep pedaling.
Correct.
Even when you don't have that person that comes along. But I think that too many young men, one, they don't see it. They may not have that system naturally in their place, in their life, in place in their life. But there are men all around that are willing to operate that. But that young men need to have the humility to say, hey, can you come alongside and push while I pedal until I can pedal without you and without these artificial implements in place, and I can stand. And that's when you become a man, when you're willing to say, I've fallen and I can get up. Okay. That's the responsibility of a man. Oh, I don't have anybody to help me. Well, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna look. I'm gonna figure out who do I want to be. And then how do I become, what do I need to put in place to become that person?
Yes. Yeah, and I think that actually stems, really well into when I think about this, there's challenges with my young men in trying to mold them and who I feel God has created them to be in terms of stepping into that true masculinity that we've been talking about. And some of those challenges, they come from not having the example, right? But it's also this, Jason. It's we have to awaken some things in some of these young men today. Because they haven't seen the way, because they haven't shown the way, they don't know what they don't know. And so we have to awaken who they're called to be. We have to awaken and pull out of them and stir and help maximize the potential of pulling that masculinity out of them, of what we know it is supposed to look like. And so those are some of the challenges that I have with our young men is, hey, do you know who you've even been created to be?
Yeah.
And when you start speaking to that, and you start speaking to the truth and the promises of who they are, and once inside of them, all of a sudden, they want to tap into those things.
Yeah.
You're telling me I've got this in me.
Yeah.
I've got that in me. Oh, I'm supposed to be able to do this. I'm created to lead in this such a way. This is my role and my responsibility actually on this planet as a man. Oh, okay. But you have to show that to them. You have to speak that into them. You have to expose them to what that is. And then slowly there's a little bit of motivation. There's a little bit of turning the pedal on their own that they want to do while we stand alongside them and guide them.
Yeah.
But it takes that. And so those are the challenges that I see.
Man, I think there is so much. I love that word awaken.
Yeah.
Because it's there.
Awaken, O sleeper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I've often used this illustration. I don't have anything in my hand I can do this, but I often use this illustration of a battery.
Okay. Yep.
And so if I take a battery and hold it in my hand, you ask, well, what is this? Well, it's a battery. Well, a battery is energy, right? Well, why am I not feeling anything? It's energy. And so if I take a AAA battery, okay, it's a battery, okay. I'm going to take, you say it's energy, then I'm going to go stick it in my cell phone. Does it work? I'm going to stick it in my car. Does my car start?
Yeah.
No, because batteries are designed to be put in particular instruments.
Correct.
Things that have been designed for a particular type of batteries. Batteries are potential energy.
Yeah. Yep. Stored energy.
They're stored energy and that energy is only released when it's in the proper setting.
Right.
Okay? So young men they have all of this energy, all of this potential.
Yep.
But it's potential energy. It is stored energy.
Yes.
Until they are in the right setting, and many of them are in the wrong setting.
Right.
They're not in the place that is awakening in them this greatness that is in them. And they don't even realize, I didn't know I could do that.
Right.
Nobody even told me I can do that. And I think about so many young men, nobody is speaking that.
Yeah.
Is calling that out.
Right. Yeah.
In them. I think four of the most powerful letters in all of humanity in this is I see in you.
Right.
That is the calling out.
Correct.
To say, I see this in you.
Right.
Now go be that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's a right context for this to come out and for it to be awakened and to be tapped into and for that battery to fit.
Right.
And I see that as training ground opportunities. And there's only specific ones that are out there that really can tap into these things and give the opportunities and the empowerment to our young men to have some of that.
Yeah.
And so for me, that is why I love coaching football.
Yeah.
I think football, I think wrestling, I think sport. I just believe in what it can do if it's used the right way as a vehicle and a tool to unlock and unleash the potential of some of these young men.
There was a video that I watched right before you came in this morning, and I intended to show it to you. But I intended to show it to you before we started taping.
Okay.
But it was with a gentleman I know named Jason Wilson.
Okay.
Up in Detroit. And he has this program called the Cave of Adullam.
Okay.
And he takes young men.
I follow him.
You do follow him
on social media. He's incredible.
He's incredible,
Yeah,
right? He is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
But I just saw this video this morning of this young man. He had him doing like planks.
Yeah.
And the young man was crying.
Correct.
And he was right there in his face saying, why are you crying? Why are you crying? But a lot of people go that's toxic masculinity. Tell him not to cry. He was not telling him not to cry.
Nope.
He says, this is the place where you can cry, and I will give you the freedom to cry. However, you must push through the pain so that you can become all that is within you. Because if you give in to the pain and you only cry, and you do not push past that, you do not become who you're supposed to be.
Right. And he didn't just speak the truth into him. He then gave him the physical opportunity for that to be shown and manifested on a mat.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And that's what's special.
Yeah. And you know what? Then he stood right alongside him, and he did the exact same thing to this young man to show, see, look at this. I'm showing you how to push through the pain in order to find your purpose.
Right.
And I think that's why it is so critical. And this is a call to men. You know what? You need to be able to move beyond your inadequacies, your own feelings of inadequacies, your own brokenness, beyond your own lack and deficit, to say, I need to push past my pain in order to demonstrate to some young men, you too can push past your pain.
Right.
And I give you the freedom to be weak, but I give you the responsibility to be a man and to push past that, to demonstrate for others, this is how you do it.
Right.
And our young men need that so desperately. So desperately do they need it. That is powerful. Are there other challenges? You say that's one of just young men maybe not being awakened and not really having somebody who speaks in it. Are there some other challenges that you see?
Yeah, the other challenges that you really find, Jason, are the things that are just out in culture, right?
Yeah.
And what they see. We've gone back to social media and some of those things, but there's a lot of, me-centric culture.
Yeah.
We preach and teach we-centric, right? And so there's a lot of those things. It's, how can this benefit me?
Yeah.
What can I get out of this? Why should I care about something beyond myself and what I hope and what I want and what I desire? Those are the things that you find.
Yeah.
And so it's tapping into understanding that, to be a part of something bigger than myself,
to
be a teammate, to work for the common good and the greater good of a big goal that's not just about me, to learn how to sacrifice and understand that sacrifice is a good thing, right? And that learning how to do tough things and say yes to doing hard things is a good thing.
Yeah.
To recalibrate how we think about, for instance, pain. Pain is a bad thing. No. It doesn't have to be.
Right.
It can be a teaching tool and can be something good. So it's really about rewiring thought processes.
Yeah.
It is about renewing the mind.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that are the challenges that we face, where we try to reshape and redirect and unlearn and rewire some things for our young men.
I think that's a difficult one now, because everything in our culture says avoid pain.
Right. Everything.
Avoid difficulty.
Everything.
I had a teacher at a school once say to me, our kids would rather quit than fail.
Yeah.
And I was
That's
like,
a problem.
I said, no. I said, that's crazy. I was incredulous. And it was at a local high school.
Yep.
And so at the time when she said it to me, I was running a basketball program called Basketball and Beyond.
Okay.
And I had 125 boys a week showing up to play basketball and to be mentored.
That's a good little program.
Right. And so it was great. And so I had fifth through eighth grade boys and then high school boys. So, and they would switch. One group would play basketball with my partner, and the other group would come to me for mentoring, and then they would switch after an hour and a half. And so I'm talking to the high school boys, and I said, this is what one of you all's teachers, because they went, a lot of them went to the high school where I was.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear that.
I said, this is what this teacher said to me, and I thought this was ridiculous. She said, the attitude among you all is that you would rather quit than fail. And they said, oh, yeah.
Right.
You're right. She's right. I was like, wait, what? I said, and then one of the boys broke it down brilliantly.
Yeah.
He said, I'll give you an example. She said, she's right, Mr. Perry. He said, let me give you an example. Now, the school they went to had 3,000 students.
Okay, big school.
Big school.
Yeah.
So you would assume 1,500 of them are boys, right? He said basketball tryouts were last week at the high school. Mm-hmm. And he said, how many people do you suppose went out? How many boys tried out for the basketball team?
Sure.
And so if you start playing with the numbers, if you got 1,500, right?
Yeah.
You got to figure at least 500 of them think they can play basketball.
Right.
They think they can
500
play.
of them at least play outside at the yard, at the park, all of that.
I got 125 of them showing up in my program.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about Chicago. We love basketball.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he said, I said, we got 500. And then there's probably at least 100 who feel like they have some skill that they can make it. Now, 500 of them might like to play,
right?
But at least 100 out of 1,500 boys would think, I got some level of skill. I'm going to try it. He said, Mr. Perry, how many people you think showed up? I said, I don't know. He said, 25.
Wow. 25.
25 boys out of 1,500 showed up for the basketball team. Now, I know there's some other factors involved in that, and some people who are watching this go, I know what high school you're talking about. These are the factors. Okay, there may be some other factors. But why did only 25 show up? You know what he said? He says, nobody wants to get cut.
Yeah.
So when we have this understanding, when we don't understand who we are so busy trying to maintain an identity to protect this weakness. I'm afraid of failing.
Right.
We won't even try, which means there is no possibility of making the team if you don't even go out.
Yeah. And I think one of the bigger roots of failure is in not wanting to have to face it is it makes you face yourself.
Yes.
It makes you have to deal with yourself. It makes you have to deal with your emotions. It makes you have to be vulnerable and honest with yourself. And so instead, it's why try?
Why try? Exactly.
Which is the worst place you could be in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a massive, massive issue.
Yeah.
That I see with young people. There is the will to want to.
Yeah.
Is gone.
Yep.
And I will only try those things that I have the capacity to succeed in with. And if anybody is listening to this, if you want to study that, go and look up something on growth and fixed mindset.
Correct. Yep.
When you understand that growth and fixed mindset, you'll see that people with a growth mindset, let's start with fixed. If people with a fixed mindset say, I will not try something that I cannot succeed at because it will damage my identity of myself.
Isn't that a lie? What a lie.
It is a lie.
Yeah.
People with a growth mindset, on the other hand, say, you know what, give me the challenges, give me the mountain, give me the difficult things, because even if I fail, I will fail forward.
Right.
And I will learn something, and I will improve myself. And I think that is something that I desperately want to see in our young men.
Yeah.
Young ladies as well, but this podcast is primarily aimed at those, helping those young men learn how to prepare themselves to perform as men.
Yeah.
Because I see our boys falling farther and farther behind in the race because they are not challenging themselves to become those men that they were created to be.
And because we so badly want to be successful, but we don't want to face the failure, now we don't try.
Yeah.
But guess what? We go somewhere else now.
Right.
A lot of our young men then go be heroes instead of being heroes in the real world.
Yeah.
They go and find success and be heroes in a digital world.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why they're tapping into the video games at the rate that they are, at the level that they are. They get lost in that, and they can be heroes in a digital world when they were meant to be heroes out in the real world.
Yeah.
And that's where I see a huge issue for us.
I think the last conversation I had with some other guys talked about this question of what's wrong with our boys. I've been asking that question. Why are our boys failing?
Yep.
This principle that the perpetual pursuit of pleasure robs them of discipline and the pursuit of purpose.
Yes.
And pleasure being fun, females, fans, fantasy, and funds, money. And so those pursuit of those things, I can be great. And I listen to, and again, I don't have anything against video games. Nothing. There's nothing wrong with video games, right? But I listen to some of these young men, and they're talking about Madden, and I'm thinking they're playing football. And I realize, wait a minute, you are a thumb warrior, dude. That's what you are.
Right. You
have this head knowledge, but you have never put on a pad. And I'm not saying you're less of a man because you don't go out and hit somebody, you know, like a 250-pound linebacker. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying is that there's something to challenging yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, socially, relationally, to say, I am willing to fail and to fail forward. I am willing to try something that I think that I'll fail at, because failing does not make me a failure. Losing does not make me a loser. I can try, I can fail, and then I can fall, but I can get up. I can get back up.
Yeah, I agree.
What are some of the challenges you face in terms of molding those young men?
Them being willing and having a heart that is soft enough with humility to understand that they don't have it all figured out. And that's what I see a lot in our young men, is they think they have the answers. You remember when you were a teenager, you thought you really knew what life was like. You knew what life was about. You thought you knew what love was. All of those things. And so there's a part of you that very pridefully thinks you have the answers, that you think you know what it's supposed to look like, that you think you know what you're going to do. And so peeling back those layers and why our young men think that they already have it figured out is really interesting. And there are things that you show them, especially in the sport of football and in context, when you put them in physical situations, it exposes themselves to themselves in ways that they didn't know were possible. That is where it's been tough to kind of break the ice with some of the young men is, hey, even when we put you in a position where you are exposed to yourself and you can vulnerably see that I probably need to mature in this, or I don't have the answers for this, or there is a better way for this, do I want to receive it, and do I even want to put forth any effort? And so that kind of goes back to the same thing that you just talked about, is I'm not even going to try because I don't want to fail.
And then putting them in that position where they can fail in a loving environment.
Absolutely. And that's what's huge. In our football program, there is a way that we coach. There is love, there's care, there's affirmation. We don't speak about what you didn't do right. We speak about what you did do right. And, hey, here's what we can either improve or correct or challenge ourselves to the next step of. And so if you don't have that in place, if you don't have a man that is loving you that way, showing you that way, teaching you that way, correcting you that way, you're not going to want to do it that long.
It's interesting. I just showed you something in my office, that C4 model. E4 model. Envision, execute, evaluate, envision again. And one of the things that we do with that, envision, what do you want to do? Execute, do it. Evaluate, how did we do? Envision again, how can we do it better the next time? I think about that for so many young people now, because their self-image is being shaped by comparison.
That's it.
And their self-image is being shaped by what other people think about me. When correction equals rejection. Critique is criticism. And so now when you tell me I'm wrong, you've rejected me, you've judged me. And now you judge me. Nobody wants to be judged. Everybody wants to be accepted. But you cannot be great if you are not willing to be challenged to get better. And so I think that is another challenge that we face with young people in this culture that tells them, I'm okay, and don't tell me I'm not. How do you possibly get better if nobody has the freedom to speak into you to say you can do that better?
And it takes a heart that is humble enough to want to receive it and want to hear it. So.
Listen, I think we've come to the end of our time, at least the amount of time that I'm willing to spend right now. So I think we'll have to do this again. But man, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for this. A pleasure. Thank you for this opportunity, and I really appreciate our relationship. So thank you, Jason.
It's good stuff. So thank you for joining us on Real Life Matters. I've been here with my friend, Coach CJ Cesario. And we've been talking about just the importance of molding young men. I want to end with just this challenge to the men, adult men who are watching this, you older men, you legacy men. I want to challenge you to not allow your failures in the past to keep you from moving forward with your responsibility to speak into some young men who really, really need your voice. They really need your presence. They really need you to come alongside of them and to hold up that bike, even as they are wobbling, even as they're saying, let me do it by myself.
Yep.
They need your presence to come alongside of them, to maybe even tell them, here are some training wheels that can help you go, but give them the benefit of your experience as a man, even your failures, to let them in those things, to know that, you know what describes you does not have to define you.
Mm-hmm.
So I really want to challenge men, find somebody, find a nephew, find a neighborhood boy, find a kid at the school. Schools need men to come in and to show young men how to be men. I really want to challenge you to do that. But then to the young men who are watching this, I want to challenge you to have the humility to accept help, to have the humility to recognize you don't have it all together, to have the vision, even you say, I don't have it, read, watch somebody, look at somebody that you say, I like how they're living, and then have the courage to say, you know what, can you help me? Can you help me be this kind of man? And if you don't have those things, I'm promising you, there are people around you that are more than willing to step into your life. But you got to have the humility to accept that help and the humility to look for it when you recognize something is missing in your life. So again, thank you for watching this episode of Real Life Matters, where we talk to real life people about real life stuff to get real life answers. See you next time on Real Life Matters.